republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Good evening. Could we have the roll call, please?
For Camarillo Airport Authority, Supervisor Long. Here. Supervisor Zaragoza.
Here.
Councilmember Molche.
Present.
Councilmember Santangelo. Here. Bill Thomas.
Here.
Camarillo has a quorum. For Oxnard Airport Authority, Supervisor Long.
Here.
Supervisor Zaragoza.
Here.
Mayor Flynn. Councilmember Perallo. Walter Calhoun has been excused. Eugene Fussell. Oxnard does not yet have a quorum.
Okay.
Very well. For the Oxnard agenda, there isn't anything on it, but we'll go back if a quorum appears to get the sign off on the minutes.
Thank you.
Do we want the approval of the minutes?
Yes, ma'am. I was almost going to. Thank you.
I'm here for you.
Thank you. So tonight, Camarillo has two sets of minutes for approval. The September 12th minutes. Do I have a motion for the 12th of September?
Move to approve.
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, approved. And now for the 10 October minutes.
Motion to approve?
Second.
Favor?
Aye.
Approved. And one abstention. Thank you. So now it's time for public comment period. I don't have any cards. Small audience, if there's anybody that has any public comment, you're welcome. Okay. Hearing none. Unfinished business, we have none. New business, item 6A. Mr. Director.
Hey, Mr. Chairman, I'm actually going to ask our lease manager, Madeline Hurley, to introduce our guest tonight for the presentation they have.
Very good.
Good evening, Board, and happy holidays to everyone. Wanted to introduce the item for Silver Strand Grid lease at the Camarillo Airport. You may remember about a little over a year ago, we brought an option agreement to you for approval, which you approved. And this is the same group. They are 1 year into their option agreement, and they're pursuing their permits for their facility, and have a presentation for you tonight. I've printed out the presentation for you if you want to take it home and study, but they've come here from Colorado to do this presentation for you tonight. So with that, I'm going to introduce Dustin Pulciani and Eric Stoutenberg from Able Grid Energy, Silver Strand, and their consultant, Rafik Albert.
Thank you, Madeline.
Yeah, just sort of introduce, introduce yourself just so we have it on the tape.
Absolutely. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for the opportunity to speak and come before you this evening. As Madeline mentioned, my name is Dustin Pulciani. I'm the Director of Real Estate for Able Grid Energy Solutions.
Yes, and Eric Stoutenberg, Chief Development Officer from Able Grid Energy Solutions. And I'll apologize in advance for my cold, a hazard of having little kids, so just getting over.
Just stay that far away from us.
Rafik Albert with EPD Solutions. I'm supporting the entitlement of the project.
Okay, I think I can start clicking, right? All right. So we have a few slides to show you guys tonight. I believe you also have hard copies. Please feel free at any point in time. Let us know if you have any questions, if something we're talking about is not making sense. But want to just kind of walk through a little bit of an introduction in terms of what our company is doing, a little bit of information about battery storage in general, also why we chose this particular location, and then just, again, try to address any comments, questions, concerns that you may have. And again, thank you for your time this evening. Just a real quick introduction for our company. Able Grid Energy Solutions was founded in 2017, and we're based in Boulder, Colorado. We currently have 15 employees, and one major component of our company is we're a developer and operator of battery storage facilities, but one major component, and that's my position on the real estate side, is to secure site control for our projects. And in 2 years so far, we've secured site control in 10 states for our projects, 3 of which are here in the state of California. And by site control, I mean we have either acquired land, we've executed a lease, or we've executed an option to purchase or an option to lease. In addition to the site control we've already secured, we are currently in active negotiation for site control in 5 additional states. So in just a very short period of time, we've expanded our footprint for a large area in the western United States and also in the Northeast. Okay, I'm going to turn the presentation over to Eric.
Great, thank you. Yeah, because these are sort of new, people always ask the question, like, what does a battery energy storage project do? Really comprises those 2 components, the top 2, and then the second one shown as the third bullet down there. Mostly they're doing is what's known as peaking energy. So when the electric power system has high demand, just imagine a hot Santa Ana day with everybody's air conditions going on, there needs to be additional electrical resources to provide that extra energy. And battery energy storage projects are a clean version of doing that. Previously, power plants like the La Puente gas plant in Oxnard would have been turned on to emit carbon and other emissions to supply that power, and now we can do that with batteries. And that second and third bullets is really, in every given moment, the electric power system is trying to balance the supply of energy with the demand for energy, and battery storage projects end up being essentially a balancing mechanism for that. And that need is generally supplied by gas plants currently in California, and now we're switching to a cleaner resource. Just to kick into some of the engineering parameters of the project at the top. So 11 megawatts of power, so that means it can produce 11 megawatts consistently, and it has 44 megawatt hours of energy in that. So it could do that as 11 megawatts for 4 total hours. To put some of those electrical energy terms into context, that means that the system can operate 8,800 average homes for 4 hours of duration. So an average home pulls something about like 1 kilowatt of power per 1 to 1.25 kilowatts of power per hour. Another way, because this is the aviation and the airport, to maybe put the energy density of what 44 megawatt hours means. 480 feet to the west of the site that we're proposing to lease is the airport fuel depot. The fuel depots over there are about 8 feet in diameter and about 40 feet long, and there's about 7 to 8 of them. We have the energy density of just a tenth of one of those 40-foot containers. So if we were to switch the electrical energy that we have into the chemical energy of aviation fuel, it's about an 8-foot diameter tank and about 4 feet in depth. It's only a tenth of what's over there at the fuel tank. I'll turn it over to my colleague for the rest of it.
As Madeline had mentioned, we are currently in an option agreement with the county and with the airport that we signed back in October of last year. In roughly the last 12 to 13 months, myself in particular and Rafiq, my colleague, we've been working on due diligence activities, preparing for permitting, submittals to the city, and doing all various studies to ensure that this location is feasible for us from an operational standpoint and also just, from a real estate standpoint as any other tenant at this location would be. We are planning to start construction on our project in the middle of next year in 2020 and with an expected commercial operation date in March of 21. Part of the reason why we are at this particular location at the intersection of Houck and Willis is that we were selected by Southern California Edison in their 2018 Local Capacity Resource RFP to provide needed capacity for the Moore Park and Santa Barbara electrical system. The other reason why we chose this particular location, this overall parcel, is zoned very favorable for our proposed use, which is light manufacturing and the MDAP designation. Rafiq and I have been working again on the permitting milestones. We submitted our industrial plan development application with the city on November 1st of this year. Based on where we are on the timeline right now with comments with the planning department, we're anticipating a development advisory committee review sometime next month in January. And if we stay on track, potentially meeting and going before the planning department in February, so just in a couple of months. And I want to turn it back to Eric here to talk a little bit about the actual facilities that we're going to place here for battery storage using a Tesla facility.
So we've elected to use containerized battery energy storage projects. So they look, much like a ISO shipping container. If you open up the containers, you can see the battery racks are all on the left and right side. In the middle, that sort of stacked rack, which almost looks like servers. I believe we have a laser pointer here. These are all of the inverters.
I'm sorry, Eric, let's try to do that. We was asked by the,
Madeline, would you use your mouse to aim at what you can show?
this is video,
Yeah.
recording, and she had asked that we use a mouse pointer.
Oh, you unplugged it, so of course I can. Do I need to pull one of these out or just plug it in?
If you unplug the mouse, their clicker won't work.
Okay, so if I just click it in.
Well, we won't hold it up.
Sure.
Yeah.
We gave it an A for effort, right?
All right, great. Yeah, so those gray ones are all of the battery modules inside there. And then this is the cooling unit, it's liquid cooled. And then those are the inverters that convert the direct current power of the batteries back into the AC current that all of us expect from a wall. And the batteries in there, they're fundamentally no different than the batteries we have in our cell phones. They're lithium-ion chemistry. There's just a whole lot of them in there. So, I want to take it there.
A quickie question. So, lithium batteries have had some bad phone examples with the Apple phone smoking and so what, or Samsung, yeah. So on this kind of density, what are their hazards? Are you going to cover that later on, or is this a good time?
It's probably best we have a bunch of slides, code compliance to that, so we'll
Okay.
direct to that point. Thank you.
These next couple of slides are just illustrative. We want to show you what the facility is going to look like. This slide here, we prepared 2 renderings that we submitted with our application to the city, just to give you a little bit of visualization. The rendering on the left is an aerial view from the intersection of Houck and Willis, and basically the white containers right there, those are the Tesla Megapacks that Eric was just referring to on the previous slide. The rendering to the right, that is the same structure if you were standing basically across the street on Houck and looking back to the east. That would be our facility. One thing I do want to point out is just a little bit of difference in terms of the rendering here. This is our entry gate. The rendering here incorrectly depicts it as a chain link fence type of setup. What will ultimately be here when we actually build the facility, and part of this has been in working with the airport director and his team and Madeline, we won't have a chain link fence type of setup. It's going to be a much more comprehensive gate that will, from an aesthetic and an optic standpoint, will look very much like the same color and texture with the actual wall that will be in place. This slide, I know it's a little bit difficult to read, but just wanted to show it again for illustrative purposes. So this is this is an overlay of Tesla's site layout right onto a Google Earth map. And again, just for some reference, these are the Tesla Megapack containers that you see there. And again, I apologize if some of the information there is a little small to read, but I just wanted, again, for illustrative purposes, to show you that basically our facility and all the improvements that we're going to construct are going to basically take up the entire leased premise. Okay, once we have constructed our facility, I just want to talk a little bit about what it will look like from an operational standpoint. This facility will be a virtually unmanned facility. We anticipate 1 to 2 technicians will be visiting the facility on a weekly basis. Otherwise, it's going to be remotely monitored, and there will not be any occupiable structure on the premises. As a result of this, there's going to be minimal impact to traffic in the surrounding area and for the other tenants. And as we showed on the renderings, the facility will be secured at all times with a locked gate and an 8-foot tall concrete block wall with a stucco exterior. Again, want to just point out that the security features, the composition of the wall, the height of the wall, we've been working on this in conjunction with the director's team, and then also in terms of what the city may require. So it's been a very collaborative effort to make sure that we're balancing the interests of securing our facility, but also providing something that's aesthetically pleasing and something that's secure for future use. Our facility will also have a minimal amount of noise emissions. And Rafik and myself, again, through the last 12 to 13 months in our due diligence period, we performed a phase 1 and phase 2, or we acquired a phase 1 and phase 2 environmental study. We've also obtained biological and cultural studies, and as a result of those studies, we determined there will not be any environmental, biological, or cultural impacts from our facility to the leased area or any of the surrounding areas.
Let me ask a question. So if there's no one in the building or at the building for maybe once a week, 5 minutes, 10 minutes, what happens if there is a security issue, something's gone on at the location, fire or police need to be on site? What happens then?
Yeah, great question. The site is remotely monitored. There's not somebody on site, but the actual battery control system has a 4-second control signal that it interacts with Southern California Edison for all of its controls. All of its circuit breakers have 15 cycle, which is, do the math quickly, like about an 8/800th of a second shut-off time to prevent electrical faults. So the system already has automatic shutdown procedures, and then it goes telemonitored both to the California Independent System Operator, Southern California Edison, who operates a distribution center here, and then us as the owners to our facility.
Okay, so you didn't, the question was the connection between fire and our sheriffs or police. So if something happens, how, many a times when you have an owner, they're there and they check on the building, they meet the fire department there. What would your procedures be in this case? I appreciate the shutdown, and we definitely need that. I'm just wondering what the next step, if a fire was to happen there, or if a break-in did happen there, what kind of procedures would you take?
Yeah, absolutely. So the system has automatic alarms that would dispatch the fire department for that, as well as a remote operating center. Seeing any of those alarms listed would make the telephone call. Okay. So all electric facilities in the United States have 24-hour monitoring with personnel. They just aren't often at the site of the location.
Mr. Chair.
You've talked a little bit in the last presentation about coordinating with fire personnel and procedures and training for this type of equipment. So
yeah, correct.
You could elaborate that.
Great point. So immediately during what's known as the commissioning phase of the project, the first responders are actually brought onto the site to learn how to understand how to either rescue one of our personnel who's been injured on the site in a safe way and not be to have any electric potential or touch potential, as it's called, electrocuted, or how to address any fire concerns and how to fight a fire or a thermal event.
Mr. Chair, Eric, we have a similar project going over in Oxnard on Vineyard Avenue.
Yes.
And one of the questions that was asked there, how about if it's going to be computer monitored and operated? How about hacking? What hacking of the computer system? Have any safeguards for that?
Yeah, great question. That's actually a very significant threat to electric utilities globally, unfortunately, from usually Russian and Chinese hackers. So the National Electric Reliability Council governs actually all North American electric power system standards. They have cybersecurity standards that we have to follow. So you have a closed VPN, you have wired connections, and so there isn't like an IP address that somebody sitting next door is pick up a Wi-Fi signal.
So similar to what they're going to have there in Oxnard area in Vineyard.
Yeah. All power plants have to maintain that same standard.
Okay, thank you.
Is there any direct interface between the airport and the airport security through the interface that you have with the alerts to fire or police?
I'm not sure how that would work.
Yeah, that's a great question. We could absolutely integrate with whatever maybe safety and emergency protocols we have with the airport as a condition of the lease.
Yeah.
So yeah, if there is notification, we can do that for sure.
I'm not trying to generate more work for the airport ops guys, but since they're here and police aren't necessarily here, I just was curious if there was a way that you could do a...
Well, that's a good point, because we've had planes down in the fields. Certain things have happened. There has to be that working relationship.
I think that one of the things, as they're training police and fire, certainly our operations folks would be involved, so that they're educated as well.
Yeah. Okay. I mean, this particular area has a great interface between the county fire, county sheriff, and airport department. So I'm not concerned about it. I just wanted to know whether it was in your planning.
Are you, I just want to make sure I understand that, because are you referencing the airport ops team in a regard to respond to check, or in a respond to try to do something with it?
No, just to check and since they're on site, be semi-first responders, not try to be fire, not try to be police, but try to be airport ops and security, which, then they can initiate other actions, but at least, or in conjunction with the police and the fire.
Yeah, no, I think in that role we could play a part. I would caution not trying to get our team any further involved in that. One, it's a third-party entity. Two, definitely outside the scope of what our team does in response type category, response.
I was thinking more of proximity and presence than anything else.
Yeah, yeah, and we do that for the entire airport. So
Right.
So like if you see somebody tagging the wall, then.
Sure.
yeah.
Okay, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Great questions, yeah.
We got a question.
Being late, but your artist rendering shows a wall, 8-foot wall, and it says stucco, and then the rendering shows plants. If by chance it becomes a problem with graffiti on the wall, is there going to be earth left to plant vines that will attach to the wall?
This is inside the
Yeah. Oh, I'm sorry.
yeah.
And Rafiq, please help me if I'm misquoting here a little bit. So when we've come up with kind of the lands, I mean, again, the rendering is kind of an illustration of what we ultimately have as part of our IPD application, or I'm sorry, industrial plan development application. We of course have to comply with landscaping requirements for the city. We have a landscape architect with landscape plans. Rafiq, do you know, is there, if that type of issue comes up with graffiti, about anything about with vines or things like that?
So we would have to comply with the City of Camarillo's code enforcement requirements related to graffiti. And so we would either paint over it quickly with the matching color, and in the long run, if that does become a recurring issue, we would examine changing the landscape plan to add vines. I don't think that's an issue that would become a major issue operationally for us.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay. All right. We also wanted to just highlight some of the benefits that our lease and battery storage will have, not only for the airport, but also for the surrounding community. Having a 25-year lease term is obviously beneficial to the airport and to the county. Will be a long-term tenant and a long-term revenue stream for the airport. In general, a battery storage facility at this location will help support the fulfillment of the state of California's goal to provide 100% clean energy by 2045. And then battery storage in general, and our project specifically, is going to support community goals to provide a more resilient power grid and long-term improvement to air quality, as Eric had mentioned earlier.
Mr. Chair, what's the life of the batteries?
Yeah, the system has a 20-year resource adequacy contract with Southern California Edison, so it has a minimum life of 20 years.
20 years, okay.
Correct, yeah.
Great.
So yeah, to speak, obviously as a tenant of the airport, first and foremost, we don't want to be a nuisance to any other neighbors. I think we've mentioned earlier, things like noise, emissions, et cetera. We don't bring those to the airport. We're frankly going to be a boring tenant of the airport once we're finished with construction. And to get into your questions about risks, the main one that comes up with batteries is always fires. So what we've posted here is all of the requirements, codes and standards, beginning with the California Building Code that we must comply with in order to be built. The primary one that deals with either thermal events, batteries generally don't burn, they usually do is smoke, and they may light other things on fire. But given that we're in a containerized solution as opposed to buildings, there isn't a lot of flammable materials other than the plastics that are fundamentally in the batteries and in the steel container itself. And it's further mitigated by having the spacing between those containers so that an event in one container doesn't spread to others and can be contained. So the primary way to address the safety risk around thermal events or potentially leading to fires is the National Fire Protection Association Code 855. That was developed primarily in concert with the New York Fire Department, who's obviously very sensitive to fires and hazards. The California Building Code adopted the majority of those NFPA 855 things that preceded the NFPA 855 standards. We continue to adopt additional ones on those, and those also include UL 9540 and UL 9540A. And you can see that the Tesla Megapack is tested to those standards as well. That's one of the reasons we selected them as opposed to other vendors. There's a lot of Chinese vendors who haven't yet made those standards. And then for a question asked last week was, do we have any electromagnetic emissions? Emissions usually come from things like very large transformers. The transformers on our site are equivalent to the transformers that serve all the other buildings in the area. So you have a high side of 16 kilovolts. Those are the lines that already exist in the area, and you have a low side of 480 volts. Those connect to the megapacks, and that's the same that connects to a commercial building. And it all compliant with the FCC emission standards for things. If you walk by, your cell phone still operates, et cetera. To go a little bit further into those, as I mentioned, this is the central committee that does two things. They either examine all incidents that have happened in the United States and then apply standards to ensure they don't occur again. And they're primarily developed, like I said, by New York City Fire Department, who is very active in it. We do have a colleague who wasn't able to attend tonight, who also sits on that committee, and we adopt all those standards in, as does the vendor, Tesla. Key to the aspect is to consider, okay, we've already mitigated, we've already applied these standards. You still ask the what if question. That what if question is, okay, if one of these things does go on fire, that's why you have these setbacks that are per the California Building Code of 10 feet from all exposures to anything else, as well as all the lot lines, and an 8-foot separation between the containers themselves, so we don't have one event propagating to more and more. The way that to jump a little bit ahead to how we train first responders, is that we don't put their lives at risk. They generally are just containing the fire. They're not fighting the fire. If an event happens, it's our loss, it's our business loss. It's not to put their lives at risk trying to save our batteries. So that's one key component of the first responder thing, is don't go in and do anything more that you have. It's just property, let it go. We don't want to expose anybody to loss of life.
From the smoke and fumes in a fire like that, how bad is it?
In terms of, it'd be hard to quantify, maybe the scope of the thing. Again, like if you want to do,
If you burned up one of the containers,
Yep.
they obviously have tested it and they know what kind of emissions come out of it. How bad is it?
Yeah, to answer your question, to like sort of like what's the energy equivalent? So like I said, if you took all that fuel, which is about 1,500 gallons of fuel, we have 15 of those, so it's 100 gallons of fuel. The difference is, if you took 100 gallons of fuel and lit that on fire, it's supposed to burn. It's a combustible fluid.
Yeah.
These aren't supposed to burn. They're supposed to store electrical energy and back. So again, you're going to have, smoke associated with the burning of the plastic inside of it. And again, all fires are hazardous events.
Yeah.
Even a building is going to put up a hazardous material that you should definitely not be breathing. So it's really the same risk profile as a building in that aspect.
How do you keep these batteries charged?
Yeah, great question. So we're connected to the 16 kilovolt Southern California Edison electric distribution system. And so under the contract with them, we're basically charging the batteries when they have an excess supply of energy, particularly at night when there's low electric demand. And then when it comes back on to the afternoon or the evenings when people are using all their energy at their home or their business, that's when we put the energy back onto the grid.
Thank you.
Sure. Any other safety questions before we move on to sort of, yes?
Not so much a safety question. In the event of a natural disaster or some sort of emergency, is a facility like this anticipated to be used for any purpose?
Yeah, great question. It could be. That'd be at the election of Southern California Edison. So what's often referred to, and you may be able to look up, the Humboldt Airport is doing something similar where they're doing what's called as a microgrid. That involves installing additional system equipment on the utility side to allow what's known as islanding, where they could, operate the Ventura County Fire and Rescue helicopter station over there, et cetera. That'd require additional equipment, and that'd be, again, at Southern California Edison's, election. That's one of the reasons to site these at airports, is to potentially allow the future development of a microgridded application for that resiliency benefit. During a significant earthquake, likely our system would also trip off for safety reasons until they can ensure that we don't have any down power lines from the utility outside that may compromise it, and then we could turn it back on, again, only in at SCE's election.
Okay, thanks.
Sure.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to add a comment to that. There's actually an independent effort going on right now with the county, and we've been charged or asked to participate in that, to look at the possibility of a microgrid for just that very reason for the county. And we can envision that it would be possibly located at the airport as well. So we're looking at a very similar concept, and it's possible, I guess, maybe we could even explore whether this one could serve in that capacity or not, but we're definitely already looking at that for a county perspective.
Good, and that's a county initiative?
It is.
Okay, perfect. I was hoping you were going to say that.
Yeah, no, it is.
From the CEO's office.
Yeah.
There's another question on the
Got
end.
him.
You mentioned that you're going to be doing everything up to the current building, to the building codes, the current ones that are on the books at the time that the project is approved, or if the project is approved later on, anything that is approved between now and then?
Correct. So we're intending to start construction in March, and the project must hit its commercial operations date of March 2021. So yeah, any building codes are going to be applicable at the time of initiating construction and getting the permit with the city of Camarillo and in coordination with the fire department. So.
Okay, any other questions? Thank you.
Okay, just one more bit of information that we want to just bring to everybody's attention. And again, this is a collaborative effort that we've had with the airport director and his team and with Madeline, is we wanted to really try to construct a facility, build improvements at this location that will obviously the requirements that we need for the operation of our facility, but you know, we're not going to be here forever. And when our term is ended, what kind of improvements can we maintain and keep, and then ultimately hand over back to the airport and to the county at the end of our term? So just these improvements that we've wanted to bring to your attention. Obviously, the concrete block wall with a stucco finish that we've shown on the renderings. A security gate with a security system and lighting, paved access to the location, landscaping, of course, that is in continual compliance with the city requirements. So, we're required to bring in stormwater management. Obviously, that's going to stay in place. The 11 megawatts of interconnection capabilities. There's some far-reaching potential with that, as everybody has just mentioned. Those are the things that we are going to leave behind once we have moved on. And I just want to highlight that this category of improvements, that total value is going to exceed $1 million. That's to a benefit to the airport and to the county.
Would I be guessing that if at the end of your lease, the things that wouldn't stay would be the batteries?
That's correct. We're in our lease, we have a language that requires, we need to decommission the facilities and remove all of the non-essential, the things that are fundamental to our operations will be removed.
But and recognizing that businesses change and all that, but there's potential that then the next generation of batteries could go in there, or whatever the replacement of the Tesla setup.
If I could just interrupt, the removal is at our option, so.
Okay.
Mr. Chair, one of the things that Councilmember Perillo mentioned was the graffiti. The landscaping maybe might be a good idea to landscape that wall initially and set up some type of vines or something, and that way you don't have to worry about graffiti in the future. Something to think about.
Thank you.
That way you can do it right off the bat, but,
That's just where
thank you.
If before the term of the lease is over and batteries get smaller, is there anything within this lease that you would be able to add, what's the terminology, power storage into this area?
Well,
How does that work? I don't know.
Yeah, I think generally speaking, Madeline, correct me if you disagree, but language in the lease about any alterations to our facility has to first go through airport director approval before we even consider going back to the city for permitting, building permits, et cetera. We'll be right here with this group discussing that, and we can't make any changes without approval.
But there's nothing precluding you from upgrading it to the next, and look at how it's improved in 5 years. So in 20 years, I would anticipate everything getting smaller and more and better.
Yep.
So-
Yeah, as long as we have approval to do so, we'll comply with the terms of the lease to get that approval.
Yeah, okay.
Okay, no, we're okay.
That was the end of our slides. Again, thank you so much for the opportunity to speak with everybody this evening. Are there any other questions that we can answer for you this evening?
No, I just really like to appreciate the in-depth description as to what is going to be going on the facility, especially since it is new to many of us. It's important for us and our public to understand what's going on and how it'll be affected if something went wrong. And also to celebrate the good things that are happening at the airport. So I appreciate it.
I also want to thank you, and I believe, probably we all know this is a future of power, energy for the communities, as opposed to big power plants and so forth. So, and as I mentioned before, we're looking at over in the Oxnard area, over in El Rio, right next to the JJC. In fact, one of the concerns we had, because the unit's got to be right close to the juvenile justice system, and it's no effects at all to the individuals there. And so, thank you.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Appreciate your time.
Yep.
Is there a motion to approve this?
Oh, so for Airport Authority,
I'll motion to approve and authorize Director of Airports or designee to execute the lease with Silver Strand Grid for battery storage facility at Camarillo Airport Business Park.
I'll second.
okay, we have any questions or discussions? All in favor?
Aye.
Approved unanimously.
Thank you very much, and thanks for
Thank you.
coming out
Thank you.
from Colorado.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay.
Go Army.
Thank you.
I would like to now go back, if I could, to the approval of minutes for the Oxnard, and I'll turn this over to Supervisor Zaragoza.
Yeah, thank you, thank you. We have, for the Oxnard Authority, we have the September 12th and October 10th minutes. And do we have a motion for the, we got a first and a second, Perello and Mayor Flynn?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
And we're only approving the October 10th one, correct?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, October
great.
10th.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Okay, we're now on item number 7 for Director.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And first, I guess my apologies. I do give you my apologies. The Go Army might not have been appropriate in a Navy town, but he's
I'll get even.
he's a West Point grad, and my son's about to be a West Point grad if all goes well in May. So my wife and I are heading to the Army-Navy game tomorrow. So
I'm so sorry.
So I'll jump into the director's report with that. I'm happy to report, since our last meeting, no accidents to report, and where we had quite a few, I think, in the prior meeting. General updates, we anticipate having lease templates for review and approval for the commission, the authorities, and the Board of Supervisors in early 2020, and this is talking about the Private Hangar Owners Association, so we'd already pitched forth our final proposed offer there, and we anticipate having the actual templates for review and approval, probably most likely at the earliest the February meeting is what I'm hoping for. So, and then those will be going through the process. In regards to project updates, the Camarillo Northeast Hangar project kicked off this past week on the 4th. With a kickoff meeting, and then they had a notice to proceed the following day, and that's now about a week underway. That's the hangar project that we, the airport, are building. It's 41 small hangars, T-hangars, box hangars, about a $10.7 million project that the airport's building. The Camarillo Taxiway Hotel grants were executed since we last spoke, and contracts been awarded to Maxwell Asphalt. Anticipate the notice to proceed by the end of the year. We're working out a final bond issue with that project. The RKR Cloud 9 project is the private third-party project that you've heard a little bit about lately. The M&D public comment period ended on 11/20 on that. The comments are being reviewed and answered ultimately, and then ultimately coming before the Commission, Authority, and Board of Supervisors for final approval. The Oxnard ALP Airport Layout Plan project update project draft submitted to the FAA was submitted to the FAA on October the 8th. The Oxnard runway project design scope is being worked out with FAA and consultant. Revised anticipated construction date is now June 2021, where we had thought that work might take place in 2020. We were working out some final details for design and scope, and that's been in our favor, so we're okay with that. So the year actually helps us out too, so that works probably 2021 now. The Oxnard 139 discrepancies, we're wrapping up that. The runway marking schedule is scheduled for December 16th through the 20th from 10 p.m. to 6 a.m. where the runway will be closed during those nights. Taxiway sign panels have already been replaced. And the biggest item on the project updates list I'd like to, again, remind these authorities of, and I've been sort of dropping seeds on this since my arrival a little over 8 months ago. I'm happy to report that we've now been informed by the FAA that we'll have full partnership by the FAA for a master and system plan grant. For our two airports. The master plan grant will be for Camarillo, and we're going to do a system plan, basically instead of just a single master plan, where we're going to look at both airports, and we're going to, this will be about a 12 to 18 month process. This will be an opportunity for all parties from corner to corner of the county, from top to bottom, left to right, to weigh in on the future of our airports, and of course county and city leaderships included with that. One of the things I've noticed in the short time that I've been here talking with the various parties is there's different ideas about how we should be doing things with the airport. So I use a lot of sports as analogies, and oftentimes I feel like our team is out on the field on Friday night ready to play a football game, and we're looking to the sidelines and we feel like there's 10 or 15 coaches calling plays, and it just doesn't work well that way. So the master plan is an excellent platform to bring all the voices together, to bring the leadership together, and to make sure that when we go forward for the next 10 or 15 years, that the staff is working on a plan that satisfies those needs and satisfies those expectations 100%. We don't want to be doing anything that's out of line with county leadership expectations, or the cities that the airports sit in, or the community that supports all of this and all of us. So we're excited about the master plan. We're excited about the grant that's going to help fund that, and we think there's going to be a very positive process to go with it. So we're looking forward to that, and I'm dropping seeds now to make sure you help me get the word out to get participation.
Do you have in your vision the approximate timing of being able to lay out the schedule of the process?
I do, yeah. I was just talking to Kaufman, our consultant, that will execute the better part of this project just this week, and we're trying to line it up where we are able to push their contract through probably in February, and then they would, March, and then we would start at the end of March. So we're looking for an end of March, first day of April start, with the anticipation of pushing the contract for the consultant to get to work through the process here in this authority and the commission before, and the Board of Supervisors in February, in the March meetings, with them to start following that process at the end of March. And as far as upcoming items for the Board of Supervisors, we have the Silver Strand lease approval that we've just talked about. That will be December 17th, so that's Tuesday. We anticipate presenting proposed hangar owner lease terms, as noted a few minutes ago when we do the templates, probably in the February timeframe, I think at the earliest. Oxnard runway project design scoping contract with Mead & Hunt is coming up, so we'll be doing that. That's just a small contract update. Other items to report, we've got a deputy director position open since we last met. It's unfortunate that we have to announce that our dear friend and very faithful deputy director that we had in Jorge Rubio has moved on, but we are excited for Jorge. He's moved on to a good opportunity for him and his family down in the southern part of the state. Part of his family was moving there, and he was trying to stay in the same proximity they were going to be for obvious reasons. And he also landed a very good opportunity that's going to be good for his career. So he is, yes, sir. So we're excited for him, but it's a loss for us. So that position is open. We also have an engineer position that we're going to be posting soon. We are getting closer on the Oxnard Ops Supervisor process. That's they've tested, I think, this week, and then we'll be interviewing first of the year for the Oxnard Ops Supervisor position, which had been vacant for well over a year, long before I got here. And then we've got still trying to fill one part-time and one full-time maintenance position. Since we last spoke, we have filled 3 of the maintenance positions, and as I said, we got one full-time and one part-time left.
Kip, wasn't some of the things you were working on is to raise the pay for those maintenance workers? Because apparently the pay is down to a point where we lose them, we train them, and then we lose them.
That was exactly the case, and we did, and we got that passed, and that went in front of the Board of Supervisors for adoption, since I've been here, but 3 months ago, maybe 2 months ago.
A few months ago, it was approved.
That's right.
Yep. Yep.
We're talking about your monthly activities. One
Yes.
of them was all the communication in the papers. Do you want to talk about that?
I can, yeah. I don't know.
Because-
Of course, they're in the packets as well, but I'm not.
Right.
I'm
I
not.
think
Do you have a
that's worth
specific?
mentioning to make sure everyone's on the same page.
Yeah. So I'm thinking you're talking about the RKR Cloud 9 project. Okay, and I did mention it earlier. As far as the comment period closed on the 20th of November, that was posted for 30 days in the normal areas that we typically post them all, and we have had a lot of comment back and forth on that. I can't remember exactly how many comments, but that's why that process is being evaluated now. The third party that is doing that has their own consultant, so those comments go back to them, and then they provide responses back to the Department of Airports. We then evaluate the responses that we receive back, and then we consult with county council to see if the county feels like there's any further action we need to take from that regard, and then ultimately comes to the commission, the authorities, and then the Board of Supervisors for final adoption or final law.
My more direct question is the fact that there was an article in the Camarillo Acorn that didn't have the right information, getting the right information, and the information about the larger planes.
Yeah, there's been a lot of conspiracy theories that have fed into this project. It's really unfortunate because, it's really, quite frankly, causing a lot of unnecessary heartache by a lot of parties. The thought process is that this project is some magic door for 737s, and while the 737 is mentioned in the MND that had to go before the process of CEQA, or not, well, I guess it's CEQA. I'm still learning California, but I'm used to another state. But in the environmental process, let me back up and say that. But the reason that aircraft is mentioned in there is because the taxi lane, the apron, and everything that they're designing and building, they're doing it to the same airport design that we have for the whole airport. So it equals what we've got for design all over the airport. And that's a ADG3, Airport Design Group 3 type design category. And that design category has a range of aircraft in it that we already operate with today at the airport. So this facility, while it might be a little nicer, is really the same facility or very similar to what we already have in three or four other locations already on the airport operating and handling.
And thank you, because I know that my constituents are watching and they're listening. So
Good.
when I ask you these questions, it's because I get texts and calls and all sorts of stuff. And I want to make sure that we're saying things clearly so that people are understanding what our projects are doing, and so that we can clear the air on some of these things. So thank you.
Absolutely. And I'm happy to take any further questions on that particular project. And we have there's a representative in the audience that represents that group if you'd like to inquire further as well.
So we direct them to you.
That'd be fine. Yes, absolutely. Yeah. And it's normal in an environmental document like that you would list the largest aircraft that's capable of coming in or capable of being on that design. So that's why the aircraft is most likely listed. The party that is building the project fully understands that there is a coexisting or a separate joint powers agreement between the County of Ventura and the City of Camarillo. While that is an independent action and doesn't necessarily weigh into the environmental document, it is a document that the county and the airport system follows and obliges to or whatever, and we make our tenants do that as well. So they're fully aware that if they don't comply with the joint powers agreement as stated, that they're also not complying with airport rules and regs, and that would be a violation of their lease. So there's a lot of ways to make sure that not that I think it's an issue, because they've stated very publicly they have no desire to accommodate that type of that particular aircraft. They will be accommodating ADG-3 aircraft, but they're not building their facility to accommodate the infamous 737 that seems to be concerning everyone.
Good. Go on. Yeah, I came prepared to ask a few different questions and make a few comments.
Sure.
Because obviously, being in Camarillo, being on the city council, both Susan and I have both received a lot of comments.
As have we.
Yeah, in regards to this project. In reading the study that came out on page A4, under description of the proposed project, there was one sentence that kind of set everything off and kind of set everything in motion. And that's this sentence: the depth can accommodate an aircraft such as the Boeing business jet 737-800 or a Gulfstream G650, two of the largest aircraft that are anticipated to use the airport. So it was that line, that are anticipated to use the airport. And looking at the Boeing business jet 737-800, that has a max aircraft weight of, I think, from my research, about 170,000 pounds, which exceeds the 115,000 pounds, or 115,000 pound limit described in the joint powers agreement between City of Camarillo and the county in use of the airport. And so that one sentence there is what really kind of set in motion and starts setting off the alarm bells. And that they didn't just describe what the hangar can accommodate, but that these two specific aircraft, which the hangar could accommodate, were anticipated to be used at the airport. Obviously, during the public comment period, the City of Camarillo, and I presume you've seen a copy of this as well, as a copy has been sent to you. We submitted 5 pages of, I think about 5 pages of comments, along with several attachments, references primarily the GPA and all the documents in there. When should the city expect to receive a response in regards to our comments that we submitted?
Yeah, so it'd be the same process that I was talking about just a moment ago. So this is not this is a third-party project, so it's being conducted in that manner. As I stated a moment ago, the party, in this case RKR, has their own consultant that is in charge of this effort, basically to respond. So all of the comments were received. They were all sent to their consultant to provide response. We are waiting on those responses, and when we get those responses, we'll evaluate the depth of those responses and what those responses do or don't trigger as far as if there's additional action needed or not needed. And then the next step after that, after the Department of Airports does that evaluation of the responses, we will take the responses and turn them over to County Council. County Council will then also be a second layer, if you will, of determining determining whether or not the county needs to take further action in some type, shape, fashion, or form as the lead agency, because that's all we are, is the lead agency on this. This is an independent project. And then if it is determined we need to take further action, we will. If it's not determined, then the next steps after that is the document will be brought before the commission, and then the authorities, and then ultimately the Board of Supervisors.
What would be your best guess as to the timeline for it to be brought forward to?
You know, it's hard to say because we're not the controlling party. All we can do is respond once we get the responses back to us. So it's hard to say because we're just the lead agency.
And then how might I'm sorry.
And I do want us to be careful. This is not an agenda item, so I want us to be I want us to be careful that we're not violating.
That we're not having a conversation. I just want to point out one other thing. I don't expect a response, but I understand that the it's relevant to this the topic, but the VCTC, which has some oversight at the airport, last Friday is also looking at, I believe, the compatibility or the you were there, I know, but whether or not it conforms to the comprehensive land use plan for the airport, I believe.
That was the request they had, yes.
Right, okay.
It was requested by the mayor.
Correct, yeah, Mayor Tremblay of the city of Camarillo.
But you're absolutely right, this is not agendized, so I think,
Yeah, I'll cut my comments there.
yeah.
The only question I have is, you quoted something that I don't have a copy of. Where did you get the information that you quoted on, that brought up the concern?
That was directly out of the M&D.
The M&D is what?
The Acorn.
The newspaper article?
No, the actual study that was published.
Was that what the mayor submitted?
It was part of what?
To VCTC.
That's correct.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So maybe we need to get that out to everybody, so you could have a copy.
Yeah, wait, I know that Mayor Tremblay submitted that, copies to the VCTC membership.
So I just want to make sure, we're talking about the letter from the city of Camarillo to VCT, or to
VCTC.
To VCTC?
But the quote is coming from something outside of that, and I haven't ever seen it. That's why I would like to know where it came from, so that I could at least respond to it.
And I can provide this to staff, and staff can distribute this to authority members. That would probably be the appropriate way to do it.
Just a question. Supervisor Long, you mentioned something from the Acorn, Camarillo Acorn. Is something in there about this matter? That's what I think a question may have alluded to.
Oh, is that what
you held up something?
Yes. Oh, would you like to see? So my staff is really good at giving me the articles that are in the newspaper. So in my to remember to talk about pile, I had there's a big ad about it asking for people to do public comment. And it's also in the agenda, and then the public comment from the Ventura County Star. And I believe those are in the correspondence also.
The bill was asking about.
That you have. Thank you.
Yeah, I think they are. I'd have to go back and look again, but I believe
Okay, so based on the fact that we do have some questions on the RKR project, I do have a public speaker card from Nick Martino that probably would be appropriate if you want to take a pause in your director's report, or we can.
Well, I'm actually done. The only caution I would continue to throw out is this is not an agenda, so it probably should be statements, not questions.
Right, exactly. So I'll remind the authority that we're just listening.
That's right.
Mr. Martino.
Thank you, Chair. My name is Nick Martino, representing RKR Incorporated tonight, the third-party development firm that is constructing the Cloud9 hangars. I won't get too much into it because I think we are anticipated to be on the agenda in the next few months. But I think it was important to clarify a few important items that were mentioned earlier and the quotes. The origin of some of those documents, the quote that City Councilman McCauley had mentioned was actually from the M&D document. That's the actual environmental document that's posted on the Department of Airports website. And it does mention the 737-800, as Director Turner had mentioned, it's incorporated into the Airport Design Group 3, which is an FAA requirement. And it also says that the 737 and the G650, the Gulfstream 650, are the largest aircraft that are anticipated to use the airport. It does not specifically say Cloud 9. And that's because the airport is designed to accommodate the 737-800 wingspan and weight up to 115,000 pounds, which the 737 is capable of operating within, although limited capacity. So it's important to note that. So while Cloud 9, I'll be honest, our facility is not engineered or designed to accommodate the 737. It is designed to accommodate 80 G3 aircraft, including the Gulfstream 650. So, and that's tail height, actually, to be specific. It's limited to 28 feet, which the 737 is actually 41 feet, I believe, and change. So that's important to note. The other thing, too, is that the other documents that were provided, including the newspaper ad and the Eghorn, was submitted by a private party. That is not something that it was a paid advertisement.